A very pleasant good afternoon to all of our viewers. We take this opportunity to welcome you from wherever you are. If you are listening on Second Advent Radio, if you are listening on one of our YouTube platforms, we welcome you to another edition of Let's Talk. It is always a delight to come your way on Saturday afternoons at 3 p.m. with Let's Talk. We started a very interesting discussion last week. We are discussing Adventist education, benefits and successes. And the discussion started last week. We had with us last week our Union Education Director, and we had our principal from the Antigua Seventh-day Adventist School. Our panel has changed a bit, but before we go into introducing those who are with us this afternoon, we want to invite you to have a word of prayer if you're able to. Father, be with us as we go into this afternoon's discussion. We thank you for the opportunity to share again and pray that you will be with all of our viewers and listeners from around the world. Grant that as we seek to engage in this very important discussion, that your will may be done. Thank you for hearing and answering in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
My friends, good afternoon again. As indicated before, we are continuing our discussion. Today is part 2 of what we started last week. Our subject was, or is rather, Adventist education, and we are looking at benefits and successes. With us this afternoon, we have a slightly different panel. We do have our Union Education Director, who was introduced last week, Miss Daphney Magloire, Dr. Daphney Magloire. Daphney Magloire is the Education Director for the Caribbean Union, and as indicated last week, she has spent just about all of her working life in Adventist education. She's given over 40 years of service to Adventist education, and we are so delighted that she is with us today. Dr. Magloire, welcome back to Let's Talk. It's a pleasure having you.
Yeah, it is certainly a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon to everyone. I look forward to a very interesting session this afternoon.
Okay, wonderful. Now, we also, new to our discussion this afternoon, we have another education director, this time from the South Caribbean Conference, in the person of Mrs. Jessica Cunningham. I have known Mrs. Cunningham for quite a number of years. She has been involved in Adventist education, well, from the time I knew her. She has over 30 years experience in Adventist education. She is a product of Adventist education herself and has served the South Caribbean Conference for 30 plus years as a school principal, as education director. She had a stint as an associate education director for the Caribbean Union. We are delighted to have you with us this afternoon, Mrs. Cunningham. Good afternoon and welcome to Let's Talk.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greene, and good afternoon to my fellow panelists, and good afternoon to all our viewers. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon.
And we have another panelist, perhaps the star of the show this afternoon. We have a young, I want to say past student, though she is currently pursuing a degree at the University of the Southern Caribbean. Miss Alicia Lewis is with us this afternoon. We want to welcome her. She has spent a number of years in Adventist education. She's a young lady, 18 years old. She's a second-year student at the University of Southern Caribbean. She's currently pursuing a BS in accounting. She is actively involved in various aspects of work, and is a product of Adventist education, having attended institutions for the last 14 years. She's a member of the Clay Hall Seventh Adventist congregation and aims to make a positive impact in the lives of her peers and all she associates with. We are so delighted to have you with us this afternoon. Alicia, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here, and I do look forward to this afternoon's discussion.
Wonderful. So friends, we have some very important guests who will guide in our discussion. We regret that Mrs. Edwards cannot be with us this afternoon, but we will make reference to some of the things that she shared last week as we seek to build. I want to remind our viewers that our topic is Adventist education, and we're talking about this afternoon, we're talking about benefits and successes. So that is what we really are discussing today. I want to begin the discussion this way. Today, last week we sometimes on Let's Talk, I have to say, time goes by very quickly, perhaps all the time. Time goes by very quickly, and we really didn't get into the subject as we would have liked to. So I want to be clear that we are not here to belittle any public or other private schools. We appreciate all institutions that seek to provide education for our youths, right? Notwithstanding, there is something special about Adventist education, and that's what we want to highlight. So I'm going to begin by asking our panelists, from your perspective, and I'm going to ask you to be short in your response. I know you can speak for an hour on this, but be short in your response. What is it about Adventist education that makes it so special? So that's question number one. We are dealing with benefits, and I really want to focus this afternoon on benefits because, we didn't go far into it. Some of you who viewed last week may rightly have concluded that we did not discuss much about the benefits. But let's just begin with this question. You may say this is a warming up question. What is so special about Adventist education?
Well, I can start, and thanks for saying the answers should be short because I can talk a whole day about the benefits, but I know time passes very quickly. But Adventist education offers academic excellence. We also boast of innovative teaching and learning practices like other public and private school systems. But among all the benefits of Adventist education, what I value the most is that our education, it layers all our learning with a distinct biblical Adventist worldview. Now, if Adventist education is properly taught or properly let me just use taught, I can't find the right way I want to say. If Adventist education is properly delivered, it is delivered within a biblical Adventist worldview. And this distinctive characteristic of Adventist education, it is built around creation, the fall, redemption, and recreation. And it is derived from the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. So our system integrates uses what we call integration of faith and learning. So students learn all day long the principles of the Bible with an Adventist worldview. So this is what I think is the fundamental difference and what makes our system so special.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Cunningham, I'm going to ask you to add anything if you wish to this. What's your perspective? Why is Adventist education so special?
Well, I agree with Dr. Magloire that it is the worldview that we espouse. Actually, this worldview is, crucial to our whole philosophical underpinning, because every educational system will have its philosophy, and ours is rooted in the Bible, sola scriptura, right? All the doctrines, the 28 doctrines that we espouse. We don't only espouse these doctrines, but we teach it to our children, to our students. And we also promote holistic education. Now, some of our studies, like the Gilbert study, for example,
I think,
Uh,
Mrs. Cunningham, if I may interrupt you a little bit, I think your video is off.
Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
For example, the Gilbert study makes the point that one of the findings was that as we emphasize SD education, it helps our students to actually perform better academically and all the other areas that we promote excellence in. We also, our education system, to be a little more, give a little more detail, espouse a certain lifestyle, right? In terms of health and other aspects, spiritual and social, and every aspect of our being as human beings, it promotes a certain lifestyle. And our whole eschatological or end time events belief is all what also makes us special as Seventh-day Adventists. And this would be transmitted through our education system, or should be transmitted through our education system as well.
Thank you so much. Now let's go to Alicia. Alicia, you're a current student. You are a graduate of the Antigua Seventh Adventist School, and you are now in, I believe, your second year at the University of the Southern Caribbean. So as somebody who is currently experiencing the Christian education, just speak to us from your own experience. What would you say it was that has made your experience so special attending Adventist institutions?
No, I would say, I just want to stress on the holistic development. The holistic development was one of the greatest benefits that I would have received from Adventist education. You know, it did not just focus on academics and the spiritual aspects of life, but also focus on things such as the mental, the physical development of its students. And this actually reminds me of the mission statement that in primary school you would have had to repeat every morning at assembly. And yes, it was tiring. And yes, I was just calling in words at the time, but now I could actually sit down and analyze the mission statement. Even the secondary school, the mission statement, it's the same goal. Yes, it's a bit more, it's a bit different. It's the same goal, right? To prepare students spiritually, help with the academic development, the physical development, all development in all aspects, in all areas of the lives of students, right? And I think that would be the greatest benefit from Adventist education. I could also say it's not just schools here in Antigua, but throughout the region, throughout the world. Being here at tertiary education, I am able to meet individuals who have received Adventist education as well from different schools across the region, right? And they also, you could see them embodying the holistic development that they would have received from Adventist education.
It's interesting that you're saying that, because sometimes one of the criticisms we get from individuals Adventist parents who do not send their children to Adventist schools is they say, well, you know, they don't have physical activity, they emphasize the sporting, etc. But here's a student who is saying that the holistic element of Adventist education is one of her greatest takeaways. Now, I want to move on. You know, I'm tempted to expand on that, but I want to move on. Now, just off the top of my head, I can think of medical doctors, scientists, engineers, accountants, attorneys, economists, etc., who are all outstanding in their respective fields and who are products of Adventist education. And I suppose we can say the same of persons who did not receive an Adventist education. So the question is, what is the difference? Let us talk a bit about some research-based findings and the long-term impact of Adventist education. Over the years, several studies have been done. I'm aware of about 5 major international studies that have been done, one over a period of 30 years. We're talking about studies that were peer-reviewed, that were professional, academically certified. So we're not just talking about somebody doing something in their backyard. Here, we're talking about professional research projects, right? These studies reveal that attending an Adventist school is the single most important factor in a child remaining a member of the church. Now, I think this is huge. What does this say about how important Adventist education is as a part of the discipleship process? So again, they ask task students, about the impact. They have looked over 30 years at trends and discovered that students who attend Seventh-day Adventist primary and secondary schools are significantly, in some cases 3 times, in some cases 4 times more likely to remain a lifelong Seventh-day Adventist. I want maybe first our education director of the union to react to this. What does it say about the discipleship process?
When we become Christians, we are called to make disciples. That's one of our biggest responsibility. You become a Christian, you are to tell the rest of the world about the person who has influenced you to have your life-changing experience. And one way we disciple believers, or one of the most effective way to disciple believers, is really in a school system where there is, which really has a consistent spiritual environment. And one of the studies that we looked at was, I was really shocked that that study indicated attending an Adventist school had more impact than being a part of a Seventh-day Adventist family. In my mind, I thought being a part of an Adventist family would have the greatest impact on a child remaining an Adventist. But I realized, based on the study, and as Pastor mentioned, these are studies that are very robust, that the Adventist school plays a more significant role in a child remaining an Adventist. And so the role of the school in making disciples is so important. And how does the school do that? One, there's a consistent spiritual environment. A well-run Adventist school has a consistent spiritual environment. So you should see it in the murals, you should see it in the orderliness of the compound, in the teacher's attitude. And we integrate faith and learning on a daily basis. And so being in a consistent spiritual environment, it does something to our students. And sometimes it is done unconsciously, sometimes consciously. The other thing is being with positive peer influence. Now, our schools primarily were set up for Seventh-day Adventist children. We are not opposed to have other persons within the school system who are not Seventh-day Adventists, because we also have a mission to disciple them. But our primary responsibility is to our young people, to nurture them in the way of the Lord and to keep them stable in the faith. And so being influenced by a lot of people in your peer group who hold your same value, it reinforces to a great extent what happens in the spiritual environment. Then we have regular worship sessions, and we know today the families are very busy. They wake early to get to work and everything like that. And so family worship goes out of the window in many instances. But in the school system, we've got Bible instructions, we've got worship opportunities, and all of this helps to deepen our students' faith in God. And so that model and mentorship that they receive from the teachers who are committed Adventist teachers on a daily basis during the most important hours of the day, our holistic philosophy to education as a whole, all of these come together and they help ground our students. And this is why I believe that our students have a greater, we have that more of our students will remain in the school system because of the network, the consistent spiritual environment, the religious instructions and worship, and even the influence, the positive influence of their peers.
Now, thank you so much, Dr. Magloire. Mrs. Cunningham, I have children, and as a parent, one of my major concerns from my own children is that they remain faithful to the teachings that they were exposed to. You know, I mean, they're young adults now. They're young adults now, and every now and then I call them, but you know, I'm always asking them, you know, how is your relationship with God? How are things going, etc. To hear that attending an Adventist school is even more significant in the children remaining loyal to their faith and to the church than the parental influence. That to me is outstanding. What would you say about that?
Well, I have observed that in our schools, and I'm always because I attended some non-Adventist schools as a child and so on, and I observe schools as we move around. I have observed that our schools, the students are, different. In spite of the little challenges you would have societal and so on, they are different. How are they different? They are positively different. They are courteous. They are, value positive things. They constructive in their outlook. And even at the younger ages, you can see our students imbibing the doctrines and the teachings, the value system of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And that is why the studies have indicated that as students spend more time in Adventist education, there's a greater opportunity, or I won't want to say chance, but there's a greater likelihood, and studies findings have proven this, that they would remain Seventh-day Adventists, they will become baptized, right? Those who are exposed to, let's say, 11 plus years, such as Sister Lewis, 96.9% of them become baptized. This is a study done in the United States. In terms of church membership, if they were exposed to 12 grades or more of SDA education, this study showed the finding of 100%. Right, or certainly a very high percent of our children and young people as they move into young adulthood remaining in Seventh-day Adventist churches, and not only remaining there but serving in offices and so on, even becoming pastors. I can remember think of two of our pastors who passed through, at least two of them who passed through our SDA schools and are now serving as pastors. And those who go on to other professions, I have observed some of them are even non-Adventists. They came in our schools as non-Adventists and they left as non-Adventists, but their whole outlook and professional operations are different from their peers in their professions. So Seventh-day Adventist education, and in terms of the increasing number of years of exposure to it, really, according to the studies, really does something positive for young people remaining Seventh-day Adventists and becoming older Seventh-day Adventists, so that they can, of course, train their children, and the whole SDA, the whole Christocentric philosophy worldview that we promote, and the whole SDA value system is propagated throughout in our family life.
Thank you so much. I want to come to Alicia in a while, but before that, I want to make a reference to another study. This one is the Rice study. It shows that those who attend Adventist schools are 3 times as likely to marry an Adventist than those who do not. Now, I suppose people will say, what's the big deal? You know, what difference does that make, and how does that impact one's life? You know, those of us who attended USC, Alicia is at USC now. I mean, well, in my day, CUC, you know, you are exposed. I suppose USC is a little different from when I was there, from when you were there, Dr. Magloire. Should I say from when we were there? Of course, there are a lot more students now, but who you marry makes a big difference, not so? Who you marry make a tremendous difference. Well, let me not go ahead and answer the question. Why is the choice of a spouse so significant in terms of continuity in Adventism? Why, how significant is that with respect to your future life?
When
It looks like Alicia is going to answer, so I'm very
okay.
interested in hearing what she's going to say. So let's give her first preference here.
Well, as you would have said, your life partner is one of the biggest decisions that you will make in life, right? And that actually determines your future. You want someone who shares the same faith, someone who shares the same values and morals as you. So dating or making a decision to marry an Adventist partner is who will help you to stay on the right track in the future, right? Let's say I want to shift in the wrong path. Having an Adventist partner will be able to pull me back onto the track that God wants for me. Likewise, I could do the same for my partner.
Very well, indeed. And may I just add, Alicia, that if you marry a non-Adventist, if you marry somebody of a different faith, where would you want your children to go? What faith would you want your children to imbibe? You know, they may want your children to follow them, you want them to follow you, and that creates quite a challenge, so I often say, here I go again, but let me say it anyhow. I often say that an individual who marries a non-Adventist, chances are those children are not going to remain in the church, certainly not the grandchildren. You know, Dr. Magloire, you were adding something to that.
I was saying that when I was much younger, before I went to USC, you know, there was, even during my time, parents made a big effort to send their children to CUC because they wanted them to get to have an Adventist partner. And that many of them, yes, they wanted them to have an education, but they really wanted them to have an Adventist partner. And for some instances, they wanted them to marry to pastors. So USC or CUC was the place if you wanted to find an Adventist spouse. And I think it was a good vision, because the idea is, if you are in school with many Seventh Adventists, most likely you will find somebody. But what I want to add is that the society and the church is based on families. When the families are strong, the church is strong. When the families are strong, the society benefits from the strength of the family. And so the probability of marrying a Seventh-day Adventist and having a strong Adventist family is higher than doing otherwise. And so every time a Seventh-day Adventist young person is married to a Seventh-day Adventist young person, there's a high probability that they will raise a Seventh-day Adventist family. And finding or attending an Adventist school gives you many opportunities to find the people who have the similar value system with you. And so I believe our Adventist schools play a big role in providing our young people with options for marriage. And because we believe if we have strong families, if we have two Adventists getting married, they will make new families and God's church will be strengthened. So will the society be. There'll be more stability and there'll be better ethical living in our society.
You know, I think we cannot really underestimate the value of that spiritual connection. At the end of the day, we want our children to remain focused on Jesus. At the end of the day, heaven is our goal, you know, and that's the general idea. So Alicia, if I come back to you in a while, what would you say to parents who say that, listen, we're having second thoughts about sending our children to an Adventist school? What would you say to such Adventist parents?
No, I would tell parents that sending your children to an Adventist school is an investment in their future, their academic life, their personal life, their spiritual life. Now, if I'm going to be honest, after leaving the Adventist primary school, I didn't want to go to Adventist secondary school, and I'm sure many other persons could relate, right? But here am I, 14 years later, looking back at my journey from kindergarten all the way up to tertiary education. And I could say that Adventist school had an impact, a tremendous impact in my life. The lessons, the biblical lessons I would have learned, the way they apply the biblical lessons to the concepts and the topics being taught in school, all these things impacted me. The values that were instilled, the morals that were taught, all of these things are what made me who I am today, right? I embody them in the character. Everything I do, everything I take part of, you can see these things reflected in who I am.
Now I'm going to ask you another question, Alicia, because you said something that has sparked my attention. And by the way, for those of you who are viewing, I would like you to know that initially Alicia was not a part of this panel. You know, I thought about it and said it would be a good idea to have a past student, somebody who could speak from a student's perspective. And I asked somebody, recommend to me someone, and Alicia's name was recommended. I had no conversations with her. I didn't tell her what I was going to ask her, and here she is. Now, you just mentioned, Alicia, that initially, when you left primary school, you did not feel motivated. If it were your choice, you probably would not have gone to the Adventist secondary school. Why was that? What were the kinds of things you were thinking that you would not get at the Adventist school that you probably would get somewhere else? I'm interested to hear your perspective on this.
I felt like the Adventist system at the time was very strict. I felt like there were too many rules, everything was what he says goes. And then I would see my friends at other schools having the time of their lives and so forth. And I just felt like if I was sheltered, I couldn't grow, I couldn't go outside of my comfort zone. I was told what to do all the time, right? So I felt like going to an education or institution outside of the Adventist system would have allowed me to have freedom, right? But I am so glad that I did not get that freedom, because I would not be where I am today if I got the freedom that I was looking for back then.
You know, I have to say, I've had a few parents talk to me personally with a different story. They said they listened to their children and sent them to the other schools after Adventist primary school, and now they regret it, because the freedom that the children wanted, the direction that they ended up in. Many of them are no longer in the church today. Many of them have caught up in the wrong company. And so I'm glad you stayed. I'm glad your parents were wise enough to leave you. And I'm glad for your testimony this afternoon. That is so encouraging. Now, as we move this conversation on, we're more than halfway through. So I want to go back to last week. Last week, we were talking about some success stories, and we have Director Cunningham, and perhaps as I said, Mrs. Edwards isn't here, and perhaps Dr. Magloire can give us some highlights from the other fields, because I want us to talk about some of the success stories. But before that, last week, Mrs. Edwards, the principal for the Antigua Secondary School, shared some statistics of the pass rates for the school. Now, based on some feedback that I received, there were at least a few persons who felt that the statistics were a bit general. And some said, yes, well, we had 93% pass, but who knows what does that mean? So I meant to ask Mrs. Edwards to be a little more specific on that. Now, and also another feedback I got, or one or two other feedbacks, was that, I did ask her specifically about the mathematics pass rate, and she did say it was higher than the average, but she did not give the specifics. As I spoke with her afterwards, she said, I didn't give the specific because I didn't have the information in front of me. But a few minutes ago, she sent me the statistics because she was planning to be on, but couldn't make it because of circumstances. And so she sent me that statistic. And I want to share a bit of it with you. Those of you who were listening last week and were wondering, about the passes from the Adventist school that we made reference to last week. So Mrs. Edwards did share that we had 93% pass, and then she went back 5 years and indicated that, you know, over the last 5 years, we have done reasonably well. Well, let me just talk about last year. I could share more, but, you know, time would not allow. So last year, we had 100% pass in 14 subject areas. Agricultural science, 100% pass. Biology, 100% pass. Building tech, 100% pass. Chemistry, 100% pass. EDPM, I think that is electronic data preparation and management, 100% pass. Food and nutrition, 100% pass. Information technology, 100% pass. Office administration, 100% pass. Physical education, 100% pass. Physics, 100% pass. Principles of accounting, 100% pass. Principles of business, 100% pass. Social studies, 100% pass. And technical drawing, 100% pass. 14 subjects with 100% pass. When we say 100% pass, what we mean, of course, is that every single student who wrote that subject passed it, right? The statistic didn't stop there. I mean, there are some other very amazing things that they revealed, and based on some of the feedback that I received, so I want to limit my responses to some of the feedback that I received. You know, some persons also wondered what, okay, we had a lot of passes, but how many students passed more than 5 subjects? So we had 27 students doing 5 and more subjects last year, and 25 of them passed 5 or more, just so that you understand the statistics, right? So we're not just talking about people who pass one subject here, one subject there. It is also interesting to know that in case you missed it, biology, chemistry, and physics, 100% pass. These are the science subjects that people generally say, oh, I want to send my child somewhere else because the science subjects are not good. And she also did inform me of the mathematics pass rate. Now, last week, what she said was that our school did better in mathematics than the national average and the regional average. The national average in mathematics pass was 32.6, and the regional average last year was 45.7. Our school got 73% pass. So you could see it is certainly more than twice the national average, which is really very significant. And, you know, and in discussing with Mrs. Edwards, she did say, listen, you know, again, sometimes, you know, we push a student here or there, though we can't be sure they're going to pass, but because we believe so much in giving students the opportunity to shine. So I thought I would share that bit of information, and one more bit of information that I find to be very inspirational from this discussion is that we, for the last 2 years, have been allowing students who take early CSEC exam. We have had students in 2nd form and 3rd form and 4th form sit for the last 2 years. Entering to take, we had a child from Form 2 taking a CSEC exam. I think it's, what is it called now? OA. What is OA?
Office administration.
Office administration, and the child got a grade 2. This is a Form 2 student taking a CSEC exam, right? We've had students from Form 3 with grade 2 passes in geography and social studies. And of course, we had Form 4 students passing with French and Spanish and mathematics. So that do understand that I think those are pretty meaningful results. Right? I thought I would mention that in the absence of Mrs. Edwards, because she was unable to be on this afternoon. So a few persons did ask, you know, for a little additional explanation on the statistics. I think they speak for themselves. And while I mentioned 14 subject areas in 100% pass, the other subject areas were not very far behind, 93, 97% pass, etc. Dr. Magloire, like you wanted to respond. I was going to ask Mrs. Cunningham to share just a bit, not too much because we don't have much time, success stories from South Caribbean Conference. And Dr. Magloire, maybe you can give a snippet from other regions.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Well, we have Bates Memorial High School, Southern Academy of SD and CUC Secondary as our secondary schools, and they have been doing above 70%, above 80% in not only mathematics, so therefore they're above the national and regional averages, but they also doing very well in the sciences, which would have been an area of concern at one time. But over the last few years, 3 years or to 5 years, we have been doing very well in these areas. And these are the areas, as you indicated, that will be, you know, a kind of deciding factor for some students, for some parents, that is. We have achieved 100% in mathematics, actually, and we want to be consistent, you know, performing between the 90s and 100%. I must say that our secondary schools have, the academic performance of our secondary schools have been so encouraging that they have been ascending, as it were, the hierarchy of schools, because our secondary schools seem to be in, you know, a sort of hierarchy or category. They have been ascending. So much so that students who are placed in our secondary schools, CUC and Southern Academy, must achieve at least 50%, and it ranges from 50 to 85, 55 to 95. So in other words, they must pass the SE examination. And in terms of our primary schools, well, we have had an improvement, moving from 5 schools who are above the national average of 6 to 7. And then overall, we see our primary schools improving in their academic performance. Right? But that is just part, academic performance is just part of the success. We spoke about the spiritual earlier, and I am so enthused to see that, you know, our students espousing the values more and more of SD education. There's a difference in the school culture, the school climate, which is a positive one. We have other improvements in academics, STEM and tech voc in all our secondary schools now. We were operating strategically in terms of the rebranding of SD education. So you're seeing it in spiritual, in academic, in co-curricular, and of course, if we are improving, we must tell others that we are improving. We must tell our SDA public we are improving. We must tell the non-SDA that we are improving, and hence marketing takes a number of different strands. So we have conventions and social media and so on. So Seventh-day Adventist Education is on the move in the South Caribbean Conference in the right direction, I might add.
That is so encouraging, and I'm excited about the mathematics pass. You know, I like the sciences. I believe that we need to let people know the message. Too many times I think the success stories are not shared, and people need to know that they're not going to be left behind if they choose Adventist education. I see Alicia shaking her head. Is that correct, Alicia?
Yes, it is.
All right, wonderful. Dr. Magloire.
Yes, the Caribbean Union Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, we are really moving by leaps and bounds. And in the 2023 exams, I'm talking about recent information. Our students in the BVI SDA school, that is our school located on the island of Tortola, she was placed first nationally. I think they had a first and a third position nationally, having secured Miss Williams and Anaya Williams secured 11 grade 1s on one sitting. And that included chemistry, biology, and physics, mathematics. So this is really, really excellent work. She did other subjects like social studies, Spanish, EDPM, human social biology. She did other subjects, but it's very noteworthy that she was able to receive a grade 1 in English, biology, physics, and mathematics, which are the core subjects. Afterwards, John SDA Secondary School continues to shine and be in the limelight on the island of Dominica. And in 2023, 41% of all the grades the students attained were grade 1s. So very, very high quality grades. They were not just passing and you have a percentage. 41% of the grades were grade 1s. And we had 3 students really topping and receiving 9 or more grade 1s. And 2 of them receiving 9 or more grade 1s, and the other one, the person in the 4th position, receiving 7 grade 1s and 2 grade 2s. So the schools are doing well. We also have in St. Croix and St. Thomas, our students being received as for early admission at the University of the Virgin Islands. And this means that they are really excelling at the high school level. And we have stories upon stories to tell you, success stories of our schools in the Caribbean Union. And when we found the average of all the schools, the PXC performance of all the schools together, combined average was over 80 in the 2023 examinations. So our schools are doing very well academically, and there's no doubt about it. The statistics show you very clearly how well our schools are performing.
Now that is very encouraging. Of course, we do have just for information, a number of years we didn't have a school in Guyana because of the do I say, going back to the Forbes Burnham era when the government took over the schooling system. But we're happy to report that we have restarted our schooling system there in Guyana, and to the best of my knowledge, it's doing very well likewise.
Very well. This year is the first year that they wrote examinations, so we look forward to see their examination results, and we have every confidence that they will do well.
Now, Alicia, you're at USC. What's your experience like there? This is your 2nd year, I understand. What's your experience like at USC?
Yes, this is my 2nd year. I'm coming to the end of my 2nd year. September will begin my 3rd year. Now, USC, my experience here has been tremendous so far. Just like how I didn't want to go to the Adventist secondary, I did not want to come here. I actually intended to go to Oakwood University, but then I ended up getting the scholarship from the Antigua School to come here, right? And since I've came here, it has been amazing. The people I meet, the activities that are offered, it is amazing. Even the classes, the way they're structured, the way the teachers teach. Yes, some lecturers, aren't the best. Yes, I have to complain at times, but it's all, I really enjoyed the experience overall.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. I'm gonna have to tell the president that I'm promoting USC on this program, but we're happy to know that you are doing well. Now, before our time runs out, there is an important question that I want us to address. And Dr. Magloire, as the education director for the union, perhaps you may want to take first bite at this one. Well, let me backtrack a little bit, because in as much as we're talking about successes and benefits to Adventist education, we have looked so far at the spiritual component. Alicia as a student spoke about the integration of faith and learning. She spoke about the multi-dimensional approach that we take, and how she was impressed with that. We looked at some research findings that show the long-term impacts of commitment. And of course, we have so many success stories with respect to individuals who have done so very well. But notwithstanding all of that, we do have challenges. We do have areas of improvements. We infrastructurally, we need to see improvements in those areas. But there are some built-in systems that we use. I think some persons may be afraid that, you send your child to the Adventist school, or the schools are there in terms of maintenance. Are there systems in place that allow for, maybe I should say, what kind of performance criteria mechanisms do we have? how do we ensure that our standards do not fall below a certain level? How do we ensure that we measure up nationally and otherwise? Are there systems such as, for example, accreditation? Dr. Magloire, and what role does that play?
Okay, accreditation is a big word for our Adventist school system. And in short, the system tries to ensure that every school that carries the name Seventh-day Adventist, all schools operate and maintain the standard set by our philosophy. Our education system is built for a purpose. And the church has a reason why it puts so much money to maintain schools. And if you think about it, as a church, I'm not sure of any department that takes so much money from the budget besides education. And there is a purpose for that. And therefore, if we operate schools, we have to ensure that what happens align with what the expectations are. And we have all the constituency members are looking on, the parents, the church members, the pastors, the conference, the mission, the union, they are looking on and want to ensure that the standard is of high quality. Our priority is to ensure that the students are well taught. And therefore, we have what we call an accrediting body. It is called the Adventist Accreditation Association, better referred to as AAA. And that association, they have very strong ties, very strong, effective working relationship with other educational institutions, with other accrediting agencies, and with the National Department of Education or Ministries of Education. And the reason we have all these affiliations is to ensure that what we do also meets the things we do also meet the national standards. And so anytime your school has the name Seventh-day Adventist in it, we have to ensure that we operate within the standard. And so AAA commissions a team to spend 2 days at the school to conduct interviews, to observe, and to go through several documentations to include the self-study to ensure that whatever happens at the school meets the standard. The team will leave recommendations, and they will also make commendations. And after review, AAA will decide whether you get a 5-term accreditation. That means you're a very good school, and they will return after 5 years to see what you're doing. You may get 4 years, 3 years, 2 years. However, you may also get a report to say your school is not accredited. If your school is not accredited, it means that it is below standard, and the church is not supposed to invest any money in any school that is below standard until that school becomes gets to the level it should. And also, that school's name is not listed among Seventh-day Adventist schools worldwide. And this is the process which is used to ensure that schools operate within a very high standard and meet the standards set by the church.
I mean, that's very useful information. So we do have a system in place to ensure that a certain standard is maintained. Now, do you have on this team that goes to these schools to investigate, to do their self-studies, no, well, not self-study, but the assessment. Do you sometimes carry, like, for example, Mrs. Cunningham is a director in South Carib. Does she sometimes go across to East Carib so that she can maybe give suggestions there? And do we have principals from another school going to another school? Do we have that kind of interaction?
Yes, we do. Usually the head of the team of a secondary school is selected by the Inter-American Division. And that person should not be a member of the union. But within the union, we choose experienced teachers, principals, and the directors to form part of the team. Okay, the Inter-American Division also selects the person to do the financial aspect of the evaluation. But the rest of the members are members within the union. However, no one from, for example, East Carib is on a team to evaluate an East Carib team. No one from Trinidad would be on a team to evaluate a Trinidad team. And that is to ensure that there is some level of transparency.
We do have,
members.
Dr. Magloire, we do have
Yes.
a number of professionals who may not themselves be employed in our system. Do we utilize the expertise of some of these persons as well?
Okay, I have seen it happen before. So we also include persons. It doesn't happen that often, but where there's a need, we may select somebody who is not within the school system, but who has particular skills, for example, maybe in finance and other areas that can sit. Maybe you may have a lecturer at a teacher's college who is an Adventist, but who works out of the church. Sometimes we have these people sitting on a team to add value to what we do.
Okay, very well. Now we're going to wrap up because we're kind of out of time.
Yeah.
It has been a pleasure sharing with you, and I want to give each of you a few seconds to share your closing thoughts. But my final question this afternoon, I want to ask to Alicia, because, Alicia, I have to tell you, if I were, well, you're studying, did you say business management?
Accounting.
Oh, accounting. All right. Somebody's listening and is impressed and may just offer you a job when you graduate. So you never know. But it really has been inspiring to hear now the contribution that you have made. So here's my final question. As a young person who has attended the Adventist school system, you have experienced both primary and secondary, and now in the tertiary institution. What would you want to say to, you have on the panel here, the Union Education Director, there's a Conference Education Director, and you have a field president. What would you say to them in terms of any areas that need to be improved?
Well, one of the areas that I think could be improved is the activities being offered at the primary and secondary level. When I started secondary school, and well, my secondary school years was interrupted by COVID-19, which I believe would have been one of the major reasons for the activities. But when I started secondary school, we had volleyball, we had total graces, we have choir and so forth. And I think they're now in the process of getting them back on point, right? But I want to suggest activities that will intrigue students more. Activities that will intrigue them in terms of the Christian aspect of life, right? Many of those, yes, apart from the volleyball and so forth, which I would have mentioned before, they weren't much, well, apart from that and the lessons I would have taught in class, there weren't much activities outside of that would have helped to contribute to students in that aspect, right? So I want to encourage you to start activities that will help them to be interested in these things. And then from an early age, in secondary school, in primary school, they can see the importance of Christian education, and not at the level where I am at, reflecting on my years and seeing the value, but while there, I could say that, yes, I know why I'm here, I enjoy being here, and I know that it will impact me in the future.
Thank you so much. I wish I had time to ask the others to react to that, but we don't. You did mention that, you were a part of the COVID era, which of course has had many of our schools making adjustments. Fortunately, I can speak for the South Leeward Conference. When COVID came and we had to switch to online learning, we already had mechanisms in place to make that very easy for our teachers. And we continue to make those kinds of strides. Well, it was a pleasure, Dr. Magloire. I'm going to give you a few seconds to wrap up, and likewise, Mrs. Cunningham, your final thoughts as we end today.
It was really a pleasure being here this afternoon. Thanks very much, Pastor, for the invitation to share. And I want to let everyone know that Carew Education Department is making great strides, and we look forward to your continued support as by God's grace, we seek to fulfill the objectives of Adventist education.
Good afternoon again, viewers and fellow panelists. Was very happy to be here this afternoon to continue to promote our Christocentric, holistic, values-based education system, which is achieving excellence in all areas. But as far as we are going to the highest height, as God would have us to go, infinity. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Yes, Alicia?
I just want to end by thanking you again for having me here. It was a really fruitful discussion this afternoon. And I just want to end by encouraging my fellow peers to take advantage of the opportunity they have now. Adventist education is something that you cannot get all around the world. So the fact that you have it now, that is a major benefit, and you should be happy for that, right? You can do great. You can do tremendous. You can do more beyond what you can imagine doing. Just apply yourself, make that commitment, and of course, put God first.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much to our viewers. Next week, of course, in the Adventist circles, next week being June 15, we are celebrating Fathers. And next week, we're going to be talking about men's health, emotional and physical health. We want all of our fathers across the entire Caribbean region and beyond to be on next week. We have some important persons to share information relating to emotional and physical health of men. Thank you so much. May God bless you, and see you next week. God bless.